Okay, so loops are things that we want repeated during a program. They are controlled by criteria which you set within the program. Counter-controlled loops repeat up to a particular count. A type of loop is a for loop, which is a simplified version of the while loop, which is over on the right. The for loop has a starting value that you set, and then an evaluation to see whether we should continue the loop, and an increment or decrement which controls the counting up or counting down of a variable used within this to meet the criteria. The stuff in braces here is the stuff that we want repeated. It could be one line or it could be several lines. So in our example here, we're going to say for x, which is a variable, equals 1. That's our starting value. And it says while x is less than or equal to 5, we're going to execute this loop. X equals x plus 1 is an increment. In C#, we can also use x++. MessageBox.show expects a value that is a string, so we start off with a string, value, colon, and then we say plus x, which converts x to part of this string. Over on the right-hand side, the while loop has the starting value outside of the start of the loop, so we have the starting value, which is the same as this value. We have while evaluation, that's the same as this part. We repeat whatever lines, but also one of the last things we need to do is to increment or decrement the loop. If we don't, we may be in an infinite loop. Then we have this example, x equals 1. Again, that's the same as this part over on the left on the for loop. And we have while, again with the evaluation, x is less than or equal to 5, which you see over on the left. Then we repeat things. The only thing I did different on the message box show is rather than have a quoted thing, I said x dot and toString converts x directly to a string for output. You'll see that in the example program. And then x equals x plus 1 is our increment. And as it comes to the end of that, it'll go back up to the while statement to check. The while tests at the beginning. Okay, so by default, we have this test that's way up at the beginning. Okay, and then repeats. We can check at the end by saying do, and then at the end of it saying while evaluation. Okay, so basically this is the same format. We have a starting value, we say do, and we have messagebox.show, value is, and some particular value, and then x equals x plus 1, and then we say, well, x is less than or equal to 5. And if that's true, then we continue up here at the top at the do and keep going until this is no longer true. The for each is a collection of numbers, which we call x in this particular case, but it could be called anything. Now, this is the square braces are an indication that there's going to be more than one number. We call that an array, but we'll talk about that later. But it indicates that there's going to be more than one number stored in x. And so we say new int array, and then we have the numbers in these braces. Okay, and the numbers you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now it could be any set of numbers, and it could be any quantity of numbers. And it could also be, if we were doing strings, we could say string here, and we could put in multiple strings. We'll talk more about those sorts of things. Now, for each int, integer, okay, that means a whole number, and Item, again, it could be a different variable name. It doesn't matter, but item is as good a name as any. In X, okay, and X has multiple items in it, okay, so I just called this item. And I said message box.show, now it is, and then plus item, which indicates that we're going to be outputting these things. And then in this particular case, it has an internal counter, and it's going to start with 1, and it's going to go until it reaches the end of the number of items in that item. Okay, and it automatically increments, and it keeps looping until it gets to the last item. So let's look at a program. If I start up Visual Studio, I want to mention a couple of things real quick. I can say create a project, and there's all of this stuff, but we actually already have the framework listed over here, or if we need to narrow it down manually, we can say WFA, and it will list only those things. Okay, so this is WFA for C#. We can click it, click next, and start entering our program. Remember to always change this to desktop if it isn't already there. Okay, so click the 3 dots, find desktop, excuse me, and then click create. Okay, now as it happens, I've already created sort of a beginning program, and I've called it loops. Okay, now this is basically task 4 is to create for the for loop, and then task 5 is to create while, do while, and for each. Okay, now just as an example, I've put them all together, and you can do the same if you wish. That's perfectly fine for me on this particular project. Now I've put 4 buttons out here. When I created the for button, I called it button for, BTN, FOR. You can see it over here on the right at the top of this properties box. Okay, that's its name, and I changed the text there so that it says for loop, which you can see over here on the button. Now if I look at the code, you can see it says button for click. That indicates that when I double-clicked it out on the form, okay, it created an event called button for click that indicates that when the user clicks that button, this code here is going to occur. It's going to run. Okay, so int count, I called it count here instead of x. You can call it, again, whatever is appropriate or something that you feel is necessary for the name. Okay, so for count equals 1, count is equal, if count is equal to less than or equal to rather 5, then do the items in the loop, and then count plus plus increments by 1. Now message box.show, again I put in some text here and said plus count. Count is converted to text and as output. So let's look at this. When I click the for loop button, it does this. The value of count is, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when it's done, if I click it again, it goes back to this page, this form. Okay, the same is true of the while button that I created there. It's called button while. Okay, and here it is over on the right, and it says button while, BTN while, and I changed the text here to say while loop here. Okay, you can say it right over here on the right, and it shows it here. Now again, when I set that particular event, Again, it creates button while click event, so that when the user clicks on that button, it's going to do this code. So int x, okay, so we say x equals 1, while x is less than or equal to 5, message box.show. In this case, I just did x.toString, which just converts x directly to a string. There's no message around it or anything else. And then x++, and it will loop until it does it 5 times. So let's look at this. Okay, so you can see it just puts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then when I click the OK button the last time, it comes back to the form. And again, the for loop still works here. Okay, so both of these work. Okay, so your mission, should you decide to accept it, and you will, is to do the same thing for the do while on button 3 and the for each on button 4. Okay, so that's your job. See you in the forums.